Every day, millions of people get behind the wheel without ever thinking about the legal rules that govern traffic stops. Yet a simple misunderstanding during a roadside encounter can create unnecessary stress, confusion, or even legal trouble. Knowing how traffic stop law actually works, what officers are legally allowed to ask, what drivers are legally required to provide, and how to assert your rights calmly and respectfully is one of the most practical forms of legal education any driver can have, because these moments are unpredictable, fast-moving, and emotionally charged. Before we dive in, let me ask you one educational question to reflect on and answer in the comments. Do you know exactly what documents you are legally required to provide during a traffic stop in your state? The title of this video refers to what to say if federal immigration enforcement officers, commonly known as ICE, pull you over. While ICE typically conducts immigration enforcement rather than routine traffic patrol, they sometimes work in joint operations with other agencies or encounter individuals and vehicles during investigations. In those rare situations, understanding your rights and responsibilities is essential. This discussion is not about avoiding law enforcement, not about confrontation, and not about exploiting loopholes. It is about understanding the legal framework that governs roadside encounters so you can interact calmly, lawfully, and safely while protecting your constitutional rights. The 4 words referenced in the title are "I do not consent." These words, when used respectfully and calmly, serve a specific legal function in protecting your Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures. They do not block officers from acting within their lawful authority. They do not prevent lawful searches based on warrants or probable cause. What they do is clearly communicate that any search must rely on legal justification rather than voluntary permission. This is a foundational principle in American constitutional law, and understanding it requires deeper context. To appreciate why those 4 words matter, it is important to understand the basic structure of traffic stops and law enforcement authority. Under the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution, individuals are protected from unreasonable searches and seizures. A traffic stop is legally considered a seizure, even if it is brief and routine. However, the Supreme Court has long held that officers may stop a vehicle when they have reasonable suspicion or probable cause to believe a traffic law has been violated. This could include speeding, running a stop sign, having a broken taillight, or other traffic infractions. Once a stop is initiated, the officer's authority is limited to addressing the purpose of that stop and conducting basic safety-related inquiries. During a lawful traffic stop, officers may request certain documents. In every state, drivers are legally required to provide their driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. Some states also require drivers to provide their name and address verbally if requested. If ICE officers are acting in a traffic enforcement role or as part of a joint task force, these same requirements generally apply. If you're driving, you must be properly licensed, your vehicle must be registered, and you must carry proof of insurance. Failing to provide these documents can result in citations, fines, or even arrest, depending on state law. Beyond these basic requirements, however, drivers are generally not required to answer investigative questions. Officers often ask where you are going, where you are coming from, or what you are doing. These questions are usually meant to gather information, observe demeanor, and assess potential criminal activity. In most states, you are not legally obligated to answer these questions. You may politely decline by saying that you prefer not to answer. This is not obstruction, and it is not illegal. It is a lawful exercise of your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. The key is to remain calm, respectful, and non-confrontational. This is where the concept of consent becomes central. Many vehicle searches conducted during traffic stops occur not because officers have probable cause or a warrant, but because drivers voluntarily give permission. Officers may ask, "Do you mind if I take a look in your vehicle?" Or "Is it okay if I search your car?" These questions are designed to obtain consent. If you agree, you effectively waive your Fourth Amendment protection, and the officer may conduct a search without any additional legal justification. This is why the phrase, "I do not consent," is legally significant. It clearly communicates that you are not voluntarily granting permission for a search. It is critical to understand that refusing consent does not mean a search cannot occur. If officers have probable cause to believe evidence of a crime is present in the vehicle, they may search without your consent under the automobile exception to the warrant requirement. If they have a valid search warrant, they may search regardless of consent. If there are exigent circumstances, such as an immediate safety threat, they may also conduct a search. Refusing consent simply preserves your legal position and ensures that any search must be justified under recognized legal standards rather than voluntary permission. Search and seizure law is complex, but several core principles govern most roadside encounters. The scope of a traffic stop must be reasonably related to its purpose. If you're stopped for speeding, the officer may check your license, registration, insurance, run a computer check, and issue a citation or warning. The stop should not be prolonged beyond the time reasonably required to complete these tasks unless the officer develops independent reasonable suspicion of additional criminal activity. This principle was reinforced by the Supreme Court in cases such as Rodriguez versus United States, which held that extending a traffic stop for unrelated investigative purposes without reasonable suspicion violates the Fourth Amendment. During a stop, officers may visually observe the interior of a vehicle from outside. Anything in plain view may potentially provide probable cause for further investigation. For example, if illegal contraband is visible on the seat, officers may lawfully seize it and conduct a more thorough search. This is known as the plain view doctrine. However, officers may not manipulate objects, open compartments, or intrude into private spaces without legal justification. Another important concept is the distinction between detention and arrest. A traffic stop is a temporary detention, not an arrest. The legal standard for detention is lower than for arrest. Officers need only reasonable suspicion, which is a specific, articulable basis to believe a traffic violation or crime has occurred. Arrest requires probable cause, which is a higher standard indicating that it is more likely than not that a crime has been committed. During a traffic stop, you are not free to leave until the officer completes the purpose of the stop. However, you are also not under arrest unless the officer explicitly places you under arrest or restrains your freedom of movement beyond the scope of the stop. Many people ask whether Miranda rights apply during traffic stops. The answer is nuanced. Miranda warnings are required when a person is subjected to custodial interrogation. A routine traffic stop is typically not considered custodial, even though it is a seizure, because it is temporary and occurs in public. Therefore, officers are not required to read Miranda rights before asking questions during a traffic stop. However, you still retain your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, even if Miranda warnings are not given. If the encounter escalates into custodial interrogation, such as being taken into custody and questioned, Miranda warnings become legally required before questioning. When ICE officers are involved, additional legal considerations may arise, particularly concerning immigration status. Federal immigration law allows ICE to inquire about immigration status under certain circumstances. However, drivers are generally not required to answer questions about citizenship or immigration status unless they are crossing an international border or operating under specific federal jurisdictional contexts. In many situations, individuals may decline to answer such questions. Again, the key is to remain calm, respectful, and non-confrontational. The phrase, "I do not consent," serves as a clear, legally recognized way to assert your Fourth Amendment rights without escalating the encounter. It does not accuse officers of wrongdoing. It does not challenge their authority. It simply preserves your legal protections. Tone and demeanor matter. A calm, respectful delivery communicates cooperation while maintaining boundaries. Raising your voice, using aggressive language, or adopting a hostile posture can escalate tensions and create safety concerns for everyone involved. One of the most common mistakes people make during traffic stops is oversharing. Nervousness often leads drivers to volunteer unnecessary information. Statements such as, "I only had one drink," or "I'm running late," or "I didn't see the sign," may seem harmless, but they can provide officers with admissions that complicate the situation. Another common mistake is arguing roadside. The roadside is not the appropriate venue for legal debate. Disputes about the validity of a stop or citation should be addressed in court. Remaining polite, cooperative, and concise is almost always the most practical approach. Another frequent misunderstanding involves the right to record. In most states, individuals may legally record police interactions in public places as long as they do not interfere with the officer's duties. This includes traffic stops. However, recording should be done discreetly and safely. Holding a phone close to an officer's face, making sudden movements, or refusing lawful commands while recording can create safety concerns. If you choose to record, it is wise to inform the officer calmly that you are doing so for your own records and to keep your hands visible. Vehicle search rules deserve special attention because they are a frequent source of confusion. As mentioned earlier, officers may search a vehicle without consent if they have probable cause to believe it contains evidence of crime. This may arise from the smell of drugs, visible contraband, inconsistent statements combined with other indicators, or information from reliable informants. Officers may also search areas of the vehicle incident to arrest, although the scope of such searches has been limited by Supreme Court decisions. Additionally, inventory searches may occur when a vehicle is lawfully impounded. These searches are conducted according to standardized procedures and are intended to document property, not to investigate crimes. Consent searches, however, are the most common. Officers may ask for permission in a friendly, casual manner. Many people feel pressured to agree, believing refusal will lead to negative consequences. In reality, refusal alone cannot legally justify a search. It may prompt further questioning, but it does not create probable cause. The decision to consent is personal, but from a legal education standpoint, understanding that you have the right to decline is essential. Another area of confusion is whether passengers have rights during traffic stops. Passengers are also considered seized during a traffic stop. They may be asked to identify themselves in some states, depending on local laws. They may also decline to answer investigative questions. If an officer asks to search a passenger's personal belongings, such as a purse or backpack, the passenger has the same right to refuse consent. Personal belongings are afforded strong Fourth Amendment protection. When ICE is involved, it is important to understand the distinction between criminal law enforcement and civil immigration enforcement. Immigration violations are generally civil matters, not criminal. This means that ICE may issue administrative warrants, which are different from judicial warrants issued by a judge. Administrative warrants do not always carry the same authority to enter private property or conduct searches. In the context of a vehicle stop, ICE officers must still comply with constitutional protections. Understanding this distinction can help individuals navigate encounters more confidently and calmly. State law variations also play a significant role in traffic stop procedures. Some states have stop and identify statutes, requiring individuals to provide their name if lawfully detained. Other states do not. Some states require drivers to inform officers if they are carrying a concealed firearm. Others do not. Some states have more expansive search and seizure protections under their state constitutions than those provided by the federal Constitution. This is why it is beneficial to become familiar with your own state-specific laws. Practical safety considerations should always remain paramount. During a traffic stop, keep your hands visible, preferably on the steering wheel. Avoid sudden movements. Inform the officer before reaching for documents. Turn on interior lights at night. These simple actions help reduce uncertainty and increase safety for everyone involved. A calm, respectful demeanor often leads to smoother interactions and quicker resolutions. Professional experience and legal research consistently show that most traffic stops end without incident. The vast majority of officers conduct themselves professionally, and most drivers comply with lawful instructions. Problems tend to arise from misunderstandings, heightened emotions, or lack of legal awareness. Education reduces fear, builds confidence, and promotes safer interactions. The phrase, "I do not consent," is not a magic shield. It does not stop lawful searches. It does not guarantee that a search will not occur. What it does is preserve your rights and ensure that any search must be legally justified. This is a foundational principle of constitutional law, not a loophole or trick. It is about maintaining the balance between individual liberty and public safety. Another important phrase closely related to this is, am I being detained? While not part of the four words highlighted in the title, this question helps clarify the nature of the encounter. If you're not being detained, you are generally free to leave. If you're being detained, you are required to remain until the officer completes the lawful purpose of the stop. Asking this calmly and respectfully can help clarify expectations without escalating the situation. Similarly, the phrase, "I choose to remain silent," is a lawful way to assert your Fifth Amendment rights. Silence should be exercised respectfully and without hostility. You are not required to justify your silence. It is a constitutional protection. Common myths surrounding traffic stops often create unnecessary anxiety. One myth is that refusing consent automatically leads to arrest. This is not true. Another myth is that officers must inform you of your right to refuse consent. In most cases, they're not required to do so. This is why legal education is so important. Understanding your rights allows you to exercise them responsibly and confidently. It is also worth discussing the role of discretion. Law enforcement officers exercise discretion in issuing warnings, citations, or making arrests. Polite, respectful communication often leads to more favorable outcomes. This does not mean abandoning your rights. It means asserting them calmly and respectfully while complying with lawful orders. Traffic stops involving ICE can introduce additional stress due to concerns about immigration consequences. It is important to remember that constitutional protections apply to all persons within the United States, regardless of immigration status. The Fourth and Fifth Amendments protect people, not just citizens. This means that everyone has the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures and the right against self-incrimination. That said, immigration law is complex and consequences can be serious. Seeking advice from a qualified immigration attorney for personalized guidance is always advisable. General educational information can help build awareness, but it cannot replace individualized legal counsel. From a professional standpoint, the most effective approach to traffic stops is a combination of legal knowledge, emotional self-regulation, and practical communication skills. Remaining calm, respectful, and concise protects both your legal rights and your personal safety. Knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, and how to assert your rights without confrontation creates a balanced interaction. One of the subtle but important aspects of saying, "I do not consent," is that it shifts the legal burden back to law enforcement to justify their actions. This reinforces accountability within the system. It ensures that constitutional standards are upheld and that searches are conducted based on lawful authority rather than pressure or misunderstanding. It is also helpful to understand how courts evaluate traffic stop encounters after the fact. Judges examine whether officers had reasonable suspicion or probable cause, whether the scope and duration of the stop were appropriate, and whether any consent was voluntary. Clear verbal statements, calm demeanor, and recorded interactions can all influence how these cases are evaluated. Education in this area is not about defiance. It is about informed cooperation. The legal system functions best when both officers and citizens understand their roles, rights, and responsibilities. Respectful assertion of rights strengthens the rule of law rather than undermining it. As a legal educator and civil rights researcher, I often emphasize that constitutional rights are like muscles. They remain strong only when they are understood and exercised appropriately. Fear, confusion, and misinformation weaken those protections. Knowledge strengthens them. Every driver should take time to learn their state's specific traffic laws, stop and identify requirements, and vehicle search rules. Many state government websites provide clear, accessible summaries of these laws. Community legal clinics and public legal education programs are also valuable resources. Finally, remember that no online video or article can cover every possible scenario. Law enforcement encounters are dynamic and fact-specific. The principles discussed here provide a foundation, not a script. Adaptability, calmness, and respect remain essential in every situation. The four words highlighted in the title, "I do not consent" are not about confrontation. They are about clarity. They clearly communicate your choice to preserve your constitutional protections. When combined with respectful communication, legal awareness, and calm demeanor, they help create safer, more predictable interactions for everyone involved. In a society governed by laws, understanding those laws empowers individuals to navigate everyday situations with confidence and responsibility. Traffic stops, though routine, are moments where that knowledge matters greatly. By educating yourself, you contribute not only to your own safety and legal security, but also to the broader culture of lawful, respectful interaction that benefits everyone on the road.